reckon they're kidding themselves if they think they've got significantly better.
Dockers found themselves in a bit of a pickle, but they've been able to extricate themselves from that pickle.
I mean, Elliot Yeo, what are you thinking, Yeo man? He seems to have lost his mojo. Maybe he needs to get that flogness back again just to be himself. Well, g'day, I'm Mark Stevens at Zero Hanger Headquarters, and you're watching another episode of The Outer Winger, brought to you by TABtouch. Real punters play here, and I'll be joined by the great man himself, Digby Beacham, the journo from WA. Let's get on with it. Well, Diggers, how's things going over there? What a stinker by the Eagles. They had their chance to finally win a game over there, and that's all you could say. It was a stinker.
Yeah, exactly right, Steve-o. Great to have a chat again. Look, when you're a bad side, and West Coast are a bad side, let's be honest, they won one game last year. They're coming off a couple of 100-point floggings. You get few looks, and they had a look against Richmond last week, decimated by injury. They hit the front in the last quarter. You thought they were going to run away with that game. They just could not do it. And in the end, it was a very, very disappointing day on what was a big week for the club.
And what's the mood like over there? They're normally fairly forgiving, the Eagles fans. They turn up every week. Is the honeymoon over for Minnie McQualter?
There's been some angst, and you can understand why, because, again, as we said, they were probably presented with an opportunity to win a game of football, and I think at selection last week, West Coast flagged their intention to recall a bit of seniority. Owies, Schoenberg, Tom Cole, a premiership defender, came back into the side at the expense of a couple of younger players, one being Bo Allen, the top, a first-round draft selection. So I think there was some intent there from the match committee to pick a side that was ready to kick off this game. They just didn't do it. And because of that, now there's a lot of fans venting, saying, well, when are we going to be good again? We thought we'd turn the corner. And now they're fronting up to a Melbourne who are flying at the moment. We'll touch on that in a little bit.
He's a terrific guy, Andrew McQualter. Is he too nice, Diggers? Do we ever see him rip into players over there?
Well, I think he's a good human being, no doubt about that. I can reveal in the wake of the performance against St Kilda, he gave a couple of the leaders, one being the total captain, Liam Baker, an almighty talk to him in private. Like, it was a good one. And Liam Baker had his backside handed to him, basically saying, we need more from you and some of the other leaders. So I think he can walk softly and carry a big stick. And that's what we're seeing. He knows, and you saw him on TV earlier this week, he's agitated. He knows that there's a thirst from this West Coast community over here, and it's a big community that they need to get on their bike, albeit some of the metrics would suggest they have improved from last year.
Yeah, I'm not sure what those metrics are, Diggers. I mean, Ross Lyon said we've got better, and I sort of agreed with that, even though the wins losses weren't there. We'll have one more. Their win-loss ratio at this stage is better, but I reckon they're kidding themselves if they think they've got significantly better.
Yeah, I think significantly better would be a stretch. As you said, they've already doubled their win-loss record from last year, albeit they are coming off a low base, it must be said. Behind the ball, they're really, really vulnerable. We know that. We're seeing Rudy Jimmy have to play against some of the big poppers. That's not his go. He's 191 team. He should be, playing on that third top forward, or at least a half forward. We're seeing obviously no Barris. There's no McGovern. You're having to go with Digby because Harry Edwards has been concussed. Tyler Young hasn't been the answer. Brock hasn't been the answer. That ball goes inside that West Coast Eagles defensive 50, and it's getting plucked.
Elliot Yeo interviewed in the rooms. We've all done it, Diggers, after a game where sometimes you get interesting responses. Asked by 6PR, and the journo said, look, you're in a rut. And he disagreed with that. Well, the Eagles are in a super rut. If you look up the dictionary, they've got the Eagles logo next to the word rut. I mean, Elliot Yeo, what are you thinking, Yeo man?
Yeah, look, he's been good this year, Elliot, and, we know that he's coming back from, a horrible 2025 that was, devastated by injury. He looked to be a player just bereft of any solution, no answers. And look, it's Elliot's opinion. He doesn't think they're in a rut. I think most people in the football community outside the four walls at West Coast would say they're in a rut. Call it what you will. They're in a real fun. This is a club that I think's won 13 games in the last 4.5, 5 years. They're in North Melbourne areas. Right? This is a club that just has forgotten how to win regularly, and I wonder whether some of these senior players, of which Elliot is one, is carrying some mental scars from those floggings.
And is discipline a problem, Diggers? Our friends at TABtouch come up with these great stats. So West Coast, the only team to have 3 players inside the top 10 for frees against this year. That points to a lack of discipline.
Yeah, it's not good enough, Steve. Again, when you're a side that is, likely to be keeping your wins on one hand, you need to do the little things right, and discipline's one area that you can control. So it needs to be better, and that's on Andrew McWhorter and his coaching staff to ensure that the players are doing those little things right, because as we know, all little things, they add up to one big thing. If you haven't got discipline, you're going to be starting a fair way back against those better sides.
I'm looking at the fixture too. This Sunday, Melbourne at the G. They're the Sunday specialists, the Demons. This one could get ugly. If you can't beat Richmond over there, and the way the Demons are playing, ripping the ball around and moving it quickly, the defence is going to be under the pump, Diggers.
Yeah, very much so. I know Brody might check, but that's something for West Coast. But, Van Rooyen's point, you've got those nippy, mosquito, late small forwards, be it a Tudor and a Cricket. Langford pushes down there and he, that sort of fat side of the ground and drifts it behind the defence. Look, last time they were in Melbourne, they lost 100 points to St Kilda. They've already been beaten by 20 goals by Sydney. I agree. And this has Morley written all over it. I'd be worried if I was West Ham.
What's your margin, Diggers? Can you find any positivity? I'd be looking at 8 goals plus here comfortably.
Yeah. Well, you're on the money there, Steve-o. I think the line as we sit here today is 46.5. So that 8-goal margin that you flag is pretty much what the Boffins are thinking as well. Look, there'll be some that at 60 plus. I think if West Coast get within 6 or 7 goals, they've had a decent afternoon. I can't see them doing that off what we've seen in recent times.
Well, Keziah Pickett must be just licking his lips thinking, I could have 40 and kick 5. They're going to have to clamp down on him, Diggers.
Yeah, well, how do you do that? And you're right, he's rare form. He's one of the prime players in the competition at the moment. I actually made him part of my bet this week with Devo, $3.50 about Cozzy Pickett and Kane Chandler to kick 2+ goals. I think they're going to be afforded a great deal of opportunities. And as we've seen, that West Coast backline, it's left some serious goals at the moment. So that's the way I've gone. $3.50 for the left footer and Chandler, and also Cozzy Pickett to kick 2+.
I like it. I'll mark that down. Let's take a break. We'll come back with maybe some more positivity about the Dockers.
Could a mullet with tightly tapered sides reduce wind resistance, allowing for faster acceleration off the mark? Now that's something to think about. What are you really gambling with?
Well, it was a lot of bad news around the Eagles, but the Dockers got it done again. I was at that game being a Bulldog man. I thought Freo, to be honest, Tigers looked like a team a bit ahead of themselves in the first quarter. A bit of a strut, thinking we're travelling quite well. And they did cop a wake-up call, and even the coach got angry.
He did, yeah. He gave him a really good cook, didn't he, at quarter time? But good sides respond, don't they, when they're challenged? And not for the first time in 2026, it must be said. The Dockers found themselves in a bit of a pickle, but they've been able to extricate themselves from that pickle. So, look, they spotted the Bulldogs at start, and they were able to collude, look, they should have won that game, to be fair, because we know the Bulldogs have got some issues with their personnel. But the fact that they were probably pretty much still, parked at the hotel in that first quarter when they should have been really dialed in, credit to them though. I thought they were very good when they needed to be, Steve.
Yeah, they lifted. They were a bit down in the midfield, weren't they? But Luke Jackson, I just keep watching him thinking, this guy, well, we've already seen him. Basically, I saw him win a premiership for Melbourne, let's be honest. He dominated that grand final. A lot of people have forgotten that, but he's even found another level.
Yeah, he has. And one thing that Luke does particularly well, not all ruckmen do, he's so very clean, isn't he, beneath his knees. Like, he's got that wonderful athleticism. And what we're seeing now, was Brody Grundy on the weekend also, like, when they can test that centre throw-up, they're also able to get their hands on the football and distribute it to their midfielders. Luke Jackson's basically just a super-sized on-baller, isn't he? And he adds so much. He complements that Fremantle running division particularly well. He's a trump card for Justin Longmuir, no question.
And Big Mason Cox, what's your take there, the big cocker? Like, I was pretty impressed with him at times, but can you see him playing in a premiership for the Dockers? Is it just a stopgap?
He's there because Sean Duffy's there. Now, we know that's what people like to employ. They like to go with the two big men, i.e. the two run in Jackson and either Darcy or Cox. He'll continue to play while Sean rehabs, and then they'll have to make a decision. So, look, he's played a couple of games now. He'll get another run this weekend against Hawthorn, and he'll probably get another 2 or 3 after that. So I think he's warming to his work. He needs to be a little bit better. But again, he's part of a Fremantle side that is sticking on beautifully and is actually quite healthy.
Yeah, Hayden Young, another stat on behalf of TABtouch here. When he kicks 2 goals plus, they win 85% of the time. That sort of makes sense, but it just underlines how important he is. That banana goal he kicked from the pocket, I was near the pocket. I think it might have been out of bounds, Diggers, but still a good goal.
It was a terrific goal, and I thought the goal in the third term as well when he was able to shift on ever so slightly and get that football away and finish from outside of 50. You know how I feel about him, Steve. I think I've been banging on about him for probably too long, but he's the cherry on top. They've got a few cherries, to be fair. You could argue Murphy Reid is, you could argue Che Bolton is, but you saw Hayden Young last week in full flight. He's a special beast.
Yeah, if history's any guide, we're in for a beauty. Thursday night footy, Hawthorn versus Freo. A couple of sore bodies. Hawthorn, John Newcombe didn't do a lot yesterday. Club saying general soreness. So my mail is that's more knee soreness, which is an ongoing issue for him. So certainly a watch on Newcombe. If he's flown over there, so you'd think that they wouldn't be flying him over there to go to Rottnest Island and see the Quackers. So you'd think he'd play Diggers, but he won't be 100%.
Yeah, look, if he's not 100%, this probably isn't the ground for him to be rolling in to, because it's a fast track off the stadium. We're blessed here at the moment. Gorgeous weather, mid-20s. It'll be nice and slick, that ground, on Thursday evening. And the other one I thought looked a bit proppy last week was Sicily with that ankle. Now, look, clearly he travelled as well. They're both super important players to Hawthorn, but gee whiz, I think if Fremantle, and as I said, Fremantle are quite healthy, they'll get back with Fee, who missed that game against the Bulldogs with illness. He is a really important part of that back six. So I think Fremantle are well positioned to get Hawthorn this week.
Yeah, I think with Sicily, they'll jab him up. You've seen that with Ed Richards. He's getting injections every week to get through. So it's not ideal. He wouldn't have been doing a lot of training, but just such an important player. I still think the Hawks will win the flag, Diggers, but I've just got a feeling that the Dockers will get this one done.
Well, they got this game last year, and it was a tight game, and we saw that Fremantle were able to finish the game in really strong fashion. One thing I think we're seeing with Fremantle this year, they're a better side than what we saw last year. I think we all acknowledge that. The ladder dictates that as well. They're stacked. They've got everything where they need it to be, and they're back home. The only concern I had, Steve, was this is their third successive 6-day break with a flight. That's not ideal. It's a quirk of the fixture. They're not making any song and dance about it. They're basically saying, let's bring it on. It's a great mindset to have. But for mine, it's a bit of a net.
Now, Nick Watson, probably the most exciting player in the comp at the moment. Who gets him, Diggers?
Good question, Steve-O. He's a ripper, isn't he? He's in rare form. I would have thought Heath Chapman gets first look. One thing with Jordan Clark and also McVee, you want them being able to use the football on the way out. You want them to be nice and creative, that offensive half-back, where Heath can lock down. Now, if Nick Watson goes up the ground, that might also cause a little bit of an issue for the Fremantle coaching staff. But I think Heath Chapman, who is their probably premier lockdown, small, mid-sized defender, will get first look at Nick.
Well, he's going to have a big job ahead of him. He just doesn't lose many one-on-ones, does he? He's just such a clever player. It's just a nightmare matchup at the moment, so he'll be a key. Obviously, Newcombe a key. But if you look at the Hawthorn side, they probably have slightly more weaknesses in the midfield. So does Sarong have to lift a bit? Brayshaw, I mean, they haven't really been at the top of their game. I thought they were pretty quiet against the Dogs when the heat was on early.
Yeah, they're probably not as prolific as what we have seen, and we've seen them in recent years. Even a couple of times this year, run up some really big numbers, that pair. But I think what happens is, Steve-O, this midfield has evolved. It's deeper than those two at the moment. Murphy Reid's going there. Shad Bolton's finding a heap of the footy. You're getting some continuity with Hayden as well. So they're being a bit selfless in there. Can they lift? Can they be better? Yeah, of course they can. But I think they do bat a little bit deeper in the midfield, Fremantle, than Hawthorn do. We know that they're missing all day. It's great to see him back this week. Newcomb's a bit sore. I think that midfield has more options from a purple point of view than it does the brown goal.
Just finally, Tracy, how's he pulled up after the finger in the eye? You've got to be careful with these celebrations, Diggers. I mean, we'll have a high five after the show. It's been that good, but we keep it we keep it offline, if you like. Well, down the line from Perth to... But you've got to be careful when you're in real life, real time.
Yeah, it was bizarre, wasn't it? And you had Josh Tracy then getting the poke in the eye from Andrew Brazier after he snapped that ball for the stoppage. But look, he's fine. He'll play. He was pretty influential early doors, wasn't he? There against the Bulldogs. He's a burster, is Josh Tracy, but he'll play. You need more from Bost. Never had a bit of a quiet evening as well.
Yeah, I reckon he's not himself, Diggers. I think since the Prancing Pony got exposed as a bit of a footy flog that we called him here at Zero Hanger, he seems to have lost his mojo. Maybe he needs to get that flogness back again just to be himself, because has he scaled it back too much?
Oh, I like that word, flogless. Look, I think one thing with him, Steve, is he's a very energetic, extrovert individual, and he hasn't been at his best. And he needs to be better than that. Maybe the Thursday night lights here and 55,000 fans and a national TV audience will be something that triggers him. But I still think he's got a pretty important role to play in that front half for Fremantle.
Well, give us a fill up. Of course, gamble responsibly. But for TABtouch, Diggers, what's your bet in this game?
Well, I'm thinking Caleb Simon can find a fair bit of the football. There might be a few stoppages in this game, particularly if Jai Newcomb doesn't play, and how Mitchell looks to lock down that Fremantle on-ball division. So I'm thinking he can find 25 plus, and I'm thinking Shea Bolton, who's in ref, it must be said as well, can get the ball 25 plus islands, and that's paying $3 with TABtouch.
All right, I've noted that on my iPad. I'm all over that, Diggers. Great to join you again from the other side of the country. It's been another episode of The Outer Wing, brought to you by TABtouch. We'll see you again next week.
You win some, you lose more. For free and confidential support, call the number on the screen or visit the website.